Special welcome to another podcast where we discuss everything technology. Today, you are in for a good treat. I've got Dr. Heinz who's going to speak to us about artificial intelligence. And what's exciting about Dr. Heinz is that he is a practitioner. He is already working in that space of artificial intelligence, and we're going to go into the nitty gritty of what this means for us. And he is also working for companies that we know very well, companies that we have an affinity with that are already implementing artificial intelligence. So I'm excited about this conversation. Grab yourself a coffee, come sit and come and learn at the feet of this giant, Dr. Heinz. Welcome to the podcast.
Sarah, thank you so much. It's a big privilege. And you mentioned the giant, but to be honest, I'm also standing on the shoulders of giants. That's what we been told, in doing your PhDs, you obviously stand on the shoulders of giants. So I wouldn't consider myself a giant, but thank you so much for the invitation. And I hope that I can bring value to your listeners.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's start the conversation by just having you introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, the journey that you have walked to get to where you are today.
Yeah, okay. So I'm located in Pretoria with my family. My wife of 27 years, she's a specialist in the Sage family of products. And we have three kids, a son of 26, a daughter 22, and then, like most couples that get bored at some stage, we have a late one with a late entry at 11. So I was born and bred in Pretoria. I've lived here for 58 years, although I did live for some time in Cape Town and for a short while in New Zealand. And then at the age of 53, I attempted the master's degree and then followed that up with a PhD. And like my wife said the other day, if you attempt another one, that'll be the end of it. I would. The reason why I did this, just for interest sake, is that personally I get easily bored and my brain has to be challenged. That background is planned. My 27-year tenure in information technology is happenstance. I landed there by chance. I completed a law degree, and then I found myself out of sorts with the practice, specifically on the ethical side, or the inaction to take action against ethical conduct. And then friends came around and wanted management help in the marketing department. And because I love people, I thought that suited me well. However, I ended up building PCs, which obviously gives away my age. These days, you don't build PCs anymore at all. Anyway, that got me started in IT. And the evolution then went into the understanding and recommendation of business solutions to organizations, and understanding problems and being able to clearly articulate them to a diverse audience. That became the challenge. And that's basically what business analysis is about. And during that time, I've really been privileged to have been exposed to a very broad spectrum of user requirements. I started off in manufacturing, went through maritime, which was a wonderful, wonderful time, maritime world of navigation and communication. Then had some stint in banking and finance, and of late where I'm now in health insurance. So that's about the gist of it. And where AI comes into this very interesting is that that's many, many years ago, in 2000, I think it was. We ended up in a project with companies like Computer Associates and IBM. And they were the leaders in the PC management, remote management market. And they were using AI. But AI at that time was in its infancy, and it was quite well developed for that application of managing PC's health and so forth. And then during 2000 to I think it was quite a number of years, at least 10 years, AI vanished from the radar. And only in the past 5 to 10 years, maybe a bit longer, AI has resurfaced. And of course, this is where we are now. We're now in a time and a space where AI is apparent, it is growing, it is becoming the go-to and the most talked about technology going forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. What a great career journey you've had. It's actually interesting that you started as a lawyer, you know. People always think the people that make it is in this industry are people who started as, IT personnel. But for me, that's a good one to actually show people that you can always pivot your career into this industry. It doesn't matter what you would have studied for your undergrad. If you have interest and passion like you do, I mean, to start a master's at 53 and going on to do your PhD, well done. And having kept your marriage for 27 years, that's excellent. Well done.
Thank you. I'll pass that compliment
Yeah.
to my wife as well.
Yes, absolutely. So before we started recording, I was very excited to just hear what you currently do. The fact that, you are working with Discovery and you're trying to help them implement some AI solutions there. And for me, the exciting thing is that we've got a live case study within our our reach, because people are thinking AI is out there or it's still coming. So when you meet practitioners that are actually working on it, within where we live, that actually elevates the conversation. Do you just want to speak about the work that you're involved with Discovery in the AI space?
I'm not at this point not physically involved with it. But what I can say about the use is that is commendable about companies like Discovery, and there are others. I mean, it's not just Discovery. The banks, Capitec is also at the forefront and so forth. But the point is this: is that the fact that these companies are working with sensitive data in the health space, where the likes of Discovery, Momentum, and those are, it must have a very clear focus on the security and the protection and the privacy of sensitive data. Okay, so in the AI space, not just looking at AI and saying, oh, this is the wonderful technology, it can do anything that humans can do and all that, so let's go for it. That would be not the right thing to do. I mean, that would be unethical, to say the least. So these companies make it a point, because they are the fiduciaries of those sensitive and personalized data, that they have to protect that at all costs, right? And I mean, you have three levels of AI. So AI, like your listeners might have started using, is the ChatGPT, all that, but that has access to the public domain, to the internet and all that. Then you have a section where companies get involved and they use interfaces, program interfaces, to start using specific domain-specific data sets, right? Which are proprietary and so forth. And then the third one, very few are already there, is where they build their own AI platforms. It's just to give some context in the three domains that AI is being used. But surely when we come back to the protection of the society, that is the major focus. And companies like Discovery and Momentum has done a major good job of protecting data, irrespective of the technology that they use. So AI now, yes, it's at the forefront, but it's not now, only now. They've made a concerted effort. In Discovery's case, they promote the health or unhealth of society, and they have a very specific focused goal to protect the health of society, which then obviously associates with AI and the use of AI. So just to set that straight, it's that we cannot use AI unless we have a very focused objective and look at how we are going to protect societal needs, ethical and so forth, and the privacy around our personal lives, our personal data, and whatever the sensitivity around that is.
Beautiful, beautiful, and well said, well explained. There's got to be concerted effort, right, in terms of just making sure, before people jump into the AI implementation, that those foundation, those pillars are in place. Privacy, of data, very, very important. And also just being aware about the biases as well, how you deal with that, ethical issues, have to be part of the conversation. Thank you for sharing that, because, you are a practitioner, you are in there, you walking the journey, and it's always refreshing to hear people who are in the trenches give a perspective on these things. Yeah. So one of the things that I know you are very big on is human-centered AI. Do you just want to give us an overview of what this is? Human-centric AI is something that is now commonly being discussed everywhere on the tables. But what is this? Give us an understanding, especially in the context of addressing linguistic-cognitive gaps.
Okay, Sarah, yes. So the the human-centeredness of AI, I think we can start with basically two approaches, and probably the worst of it is where people have been exposed to, the Hollywood display of AI, which is the Terminator thing taking over the world and messing up things and annihilating humans by the robots and whatnot. That's very much a Hollywood thing. But there are basically two approaches to AI from a scientific and a user perspective. The first is that in the domain of intelligence, that's the key word, is the intelligence thing, which I think is what causes all the stir. The two mainstream approaches, and there's a whole lot of debates in between, right? So at the end of one end of the spectrum, there are the proponents of emulation, which plainly means that we're going to mimic human form and function, right? So that's where the robot comes in, the humanoid type of robot that maybe be cleaning your house and do lots of other stuff. It even moves to what is known as organoids. I don't know if anyone is aware of that word or that domain. It's called organoids. That is the stem cell level intelligence, where the capability is generating brain stem cells. Okay, so let me just pause for a moment. Now, there will obviously be people that will take technology and apply it in the worst sense it can be applied. Okay, just like people going to war. I mean, they're using technology to, wipe people off the face of the earth. But that's humans. It's as old as our history that we do things like that. Okay. But so that's the one side of the spectrum, that we will mimic the human form and function. Okay. And then there's the other side where the thinkers and the thought leaders there see AI as a tool to be used. Like a shovel or a hammer, it's a tool to be used, but the human is the one that drives the tool. So that's very different. And so this domain is interested in AI capabilities as a system where it complements humans. So in that sense, there will be a collaboration, working together between humans and AI, for example, to contribute positively to societal needs, addressing ethical considerations, things like that, and be responsible, jointly responsible for development and deployment. This sounds strange, but yes, AI will have the capability to, in the mimicry of humans, be able to develop on its own and to deploy on its own, right? There are many examples of which programmers, the guys who really work in the engine rooms with AI, can show you what it can do. And to a certain extent, when you start using ChatGPT, you can experience that, right? It's called generative AI. But it's not near the way that humans generate meaning and language and use language. Computers cannot think like humans do. There's no feeling at the present moment, and the way that we argue about consciousness and all that. The good thing is that UNESCO, for example, late last year, they focused on declaring the ethics around AI, which is a very good thing. All the main collaborators in AI came together, made a decision that the humans should stay and remain the center of the development of AI. And so that leans more towards, I mean, both sides have an argument that both will be used, obviously. And both should consider the centricity of the human. And then, the possibility is that more good will come from it being, having the human as the center of the focus and not the technology.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. And I love what I'm hearing, because you see, that is actually a lot of people's concern when they hear AI. They're just thinking, these are systems or models that are being developed without being mindful about human beings, or they're here to terminate, or they're just here to take over. So it's actually a very important conversation to actually know that there is a push for human centricity when people are developing these models. And I think that is part of holding developers or people who are developing these things accountable, so that they are mindful whenever they are developing these models, that a human being has to be at the center of this whole thing, because really the intention is for these tools to help human beings at the end of the day and make human beings more efficient. I love that. So then, where does the linguistic and cognitive gap then come in? And please just try and explain what this linguistic cognitive gap is for everyday people that are not in the industry.
So what this gap alludes to, that I think that's the academic term. So people might not be very familiar with it, but what it alludes to is that there's a mismatch in mapping language used to the intended meaning. Okay, so both sides that I just described will have to address that. Whether you're mimicking human form and function, doesn't matter, or just the assistance in the tool space, both will face this, because basically the machine remains its nature is binary and it's precise, it's predetermined. So I don't want to go into the specifics of the AI scope and machine learning and all that, but essentially what you're saying is it's garbage in, garbage out still. If you look at prompt engineering, that's why you can upskill yourself in prompt engineering, where you're taught ways of how to what language to use and how to use it, so that you get the best results from AI. So and that's the thing. It's because this machine, and I keep referring to it and not a person. I think that's one of the big mistakes that we're going to make once starting to refer to it as a person, giving it personality. I think there we will have major ethical problems because it's not a person, it's not a human. It doesn't mean how precise we mimic the human, it's still not a human. So on the other side, humans have a way of dynamically and failingly, interestingly enough, communicate. It's very much through our failures that we create understanding and meaning. And I think that's the big difference. And I'll get to the specifics. Maybe I should jump right in if you don't mind, explaining a bit more on this. So that concludes the reference of the linguistic-cognitive gap as it pertains to the two approaches in AI. But the phrase itself should be looked at along the lines of a link or relationship between the human faculties of expression and thought. That's basically what it is. What we think we express. There's a metaphor that says, as a man thinks, so easy, right? It's a biblical expression. But it has a lot to say. I think psychology has a lot to say about it. That's why you have the Tony Robinsons of the world that educate people in positive thinking. I think a guy like Simon Sinek on LinkedIn is a big proponent of that, of optimistic thinking and all that. And it does carry a lot of weight. So our thoughts sort of dictate our expression and our articulation of our world. Okay? But the essence is that there's a direct relationship. And thought involves that functioning of the mind. It's interpreting the world that we experience. And that's what we share. Okay? And a computer, even AI, is not capable of that. It's still instruction. It's still patterns that we've shown it. It has the ability now to create its own patterns or make connections between patterns. And that's how it becomes generative in that sense. But humans are absolutely wonderfully put together to do it natively. Just example is if ever you have listened to surfers talk, this refers to subcultures, right? So the surfing community is a subculture. They can all speak American English or whatever, but when they're together in that subculture, an outsider cannot understand whatsoever. You can look up some examples on YouTube if you want to, but it is fascinating. That language that they use is completely and utterly, it's like you've never heard it in your life. It falls differently on your ears. You just can't make sense of it. Okay, so that's just an example. So the gap that further refers to this relationship being disrupted, broken, or limited. An example of a broken relationship is a medical condition called aphasia, which is a disorder that affects a person's ability to understand and even produce language. And I'll come back to how this is solved also naturally by humans a bit later if we get to that. In a limited form, an example is a person being unable to immediately interpret the sign. If you think that, I don't know, maybe very few of the listeners or quite a few will resonate with this, is that the abstract languages like formal logic or mathematics, like algebra and geometry, I had major problems with that type of language. My brain just could not get around this. And I know for a fact, my PhD referenced this specifically. So that's a type of language use that the individual brain cannot process. Okay, and the instruction keeps on giving it a type of processing, a pattern that the brain just cannot process. And you repeat the cycle in education, and it's detrimental. It gets you nowhere. Okay, so what they've done in education is they've focused on the patternizing. So they tell you mathematics, you've got to go and work out all these previous years' tests. So if you've worked out successfully 100 possible patterns, the chance that you're going to get that in the exam is virtually 100%, and that's why they score so well. All right, but that's because they've just seen so many patterns, and now it's required in the exam so they can apply the pattern. Okay. Just to put this in a different perspective, how this linguistic cognitive thing works is that if you take a language like Arabic or your Semitic languages, a word can have lots of meanings, the same word, because the hearer of the word or the sentence, whatever, has to infer the meaning from the context. Now, if you take German, for example, that focus is on the structure, the form of the sentence, okay? And the verb assigns meanings to the form structure. So it's vastly different. But Sarah, here's the very interesting thing, is that this type of language use is executed and processed in different parts of the brain. So culturally, the form and the function of the language use it comes from different parts of the brain. So immediately you can see where mismatches come from. It's not just translation between two languages. It's a deep-rooted thinking, the processing of how we express that comes from different parts of the brain. So very passionate about this series. So I could become a chatterbox. You've got to stop yourself. But that's so fascinating about the whole thing about this linguistic cognitive gap. It's real, and it definitely has a huge impact in many domains, specifically professional domains and so on.
Very interesting. A very interesting conversation, but also quite technical, I must say. So are we also trying to say, when we talk about linguistic cognitive gaps, we're trying to sort of narrow the gap between, I'm trying to rephrase now just to see if I understand what you're talking about. We're trying to narrow the gap between how a machine expresses itself to a human being, so that a human being can then understand. And the developers are trying to mimic the way the brain functions when it comes to sort of developing language and imitating that into a machine process. Is that the gist of the conversation when it comes to linguistic cognition?
Yeah, so we have two problems. You have this problem amongst humans. So human to human communication already has this gap.
Yes.
But you must have a nifty way of circumventing this. And that's context. So if you don't understand something, I mean, you must have been in a conversation or a meeting where someone comes out of the meeting and says, "Did you get the meaning? Did you understand what they were talking about?" And they've been using slides and with diagrams and things, all those things, but you didn't understand. Or you can read a book and this sentence you say, "Well, this thing is grammatically perfectly formed, but I have no idea what this says. Why is that?" And that's the point I'm making. So even between humans, we have that problem. Now, AI is not going to solve it by itself, because AI has learning capabilities. That's what we call machine learning. Okay, and there's a lot of facets, three main facets within machine learning. One is what is called natural language processing and natural language understanding. So it's in that world that the technology and the great minds are trying to narrow that gap and saying we need to give the machine the features and a whole set of examples, and by making the connections between the examples, it then learns like a human will learn, right? That okay, it's actually not that meaning, it's this, all right? And that's the direct, I would say, like the semantic connection made. I tell you what it means. And because you've got all these examples, this vastness, data set of the internet and social media platforms and all that, it starts to learn, right? But that sits with natural language processing and so forth. There are other areas I don't want to specifically go into that. And deep learning. Deep learning focuses on how the brain functions and mimicking that. It's called neural networks, right? And it's very complex. So I don't think this is the forum for that. It's very, very complex. But that focuses on how the human brain functions in that deep-rooted learning. And how it comes up with its answers. And then the third part is called reinforcement learning, which is something that we apply in education. You know, it's repeat and confirm, and before and reward. You know, it's a system, a reward system. And this is one of the areas where context plays a huge role, which we call the environment. So you learn like a young child. You'll go into an environment, you leave it, and it will start to stand up, walk to the table, and hit the table and feel pain. So next time it will say, oh, wait a minute. Last time I did this, I pain, so I don't like the pain, so let's try something else. And that's how we learn. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's one of the areas that focuses on the linguistic-cognitive aspect, as we are discussing. With those are the technical areas that AI is focused on.
Beautiful, beautiful. It just shows you how complex and how vast this field is. But thank you for explaining it, and breaking it down for us so that, even people who are non-technical can actually be able to understand, and really the gist of it is that, with AI, I think, the goal is people are trying to mimic human thinking as much as possible. Is that correct?
Yes, as I said, remember that's one area where the focus is trying to mimic the human being, right? Yeah. And then the other one is towards, as I said, a tooling mindset. I'm going to give you a very intelligent hammer. This hammer can tell you what nails to use for the purpose that you want. So that's like AI will be used as a hammer. So the hammer will tell you, you're going to use the wrong nail. This is concrete, so you've got to use nail number 2, for example. So as a human, you being a non artisan or a do-it-yourself guy like me, I'll get it wrong. I'll go and buy the wrong nails for the purpose that I intend. But the AI hammer will tell you, no, it's the wrong nails. You've got to buy those nails for what you're trying to purpose. That's a very good analogy that I can use. That's what AI can do for you as a tool. So just to give you another example, if you go to writing tools, for example, like Simplify and Coach Writer and ChatGPT and so forth. Yes. Those writing tools are fantastic. You can tell it. I am a teacher. I want to write an essay on, say, gorillas in Uganda, right? And the societal organization, for example, and write it in the style of Joe Goodall. And it will come up with that. It will write that essay the way that Joan Goodall would have expressed herself in interviews or whatever. So that's an example of a tool, obviously, I look at my daughter as a student. There's a tool which is, I forget the name now, Fetch something, which you can take to class, and the AI listens to the lecturer, and it summarizes the entire lecture for you, categorizes and all that, and then you've got your lecture. So what it does, in a positive sense, it saves the student an immense a lot of time, immense time, not having to go read through that script again, or not having to write it down, because when you write down, you don't listen. Okay, so they can attentively listen to the lecture, but also get the material immediately and it's summarized and categorized and so forth. As I said, we save them a lot of time. But of course, for the lazy student, they would probably go set up their laptop in front of the lecturer and go play games or something, go party, which is obviously not what we want. But anyway, those are amazing tools that can be used positively and can be used as productivity tools, enhancement, productivity enhancements.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I know you've touched on the real world applications here and there, but let's dive deep into that. Can you share some examples of real world applications where addressing the linguistic cognitive gap and focusing on contextualization has significantly improved the user experience with AI?
Yeah, I think the clear example that comes to mind is, I said, where a huge progress has been made is in natural language processing. That's your typical conversational AI, what we refer to as conversational AI. Um, when you go to buy something on Amazon and so forth, they have this little icon. Perhaps it's in the form of an avatar, which takes on a bit of a persona, and you look and feel and so forth, where you can then have a chat. What we refer to as a chat bot with the robot. And depending on how well it was developed, it will service you, give you a service. It will answer questions, and you can. It might come back with suggestions, even like recommendations based on what you input and tell it. That's one of the things that maybe many of your listeners have been using. They might be accustomed to it. But coming back to the natural language processing domain, that's typically where your chatbot and the companies like OpenAI, the Googles, the big guns in this environment, that's where they have a clear focus, and the development is well funded. So we're expecting that applications will roll out quite heavily in the next years or so. So the thing about this is that, as I've referred to previously, is that the human interaction can be modified until you are satisfied, or let's say reasonably satisfied. It comes to the acceptable sense. You might have, and I think you mentioned it, is that AI will still produce incorrect responses. I think the big word is hallucinate. There's a very interesting article. It's a very long article. Just to mention this for the interest of the listeners, you can look up on YouTube the very well-known Dr. Jordan Peterson, the psychologist, and he has a very interesting and enlightening discussion of an hour and a half with one of the big major brains in AI, Brian Rumelin. You can go and look up the names. I mean, it will pop up. And they discuss the psychological interplay and in the collaboration and with AI and so forth, specifically ChatGPT and so on. But it's very interesting to see the perspective and experience from a giant. Let me use that word now. A giant like Dr. Jordan Peterson and a giant in the tech space like Brian Rumelin. Very interesting. But let me come back to my spiel. So depending on the user's capabilities, okay, and the model's capabilities, that's where the collaboration really comes into play. That's how you get your return. So yes, it's sort of, there is a caveat in using these tools. And experiencing them as significantly improving experiences. So there's there is a dependency on there's a mutual dependency. So if I'm not skilled at all in using computers, I get nothing from it. If I can use the analogy, right? And the same goes for AI. As I said, it's got fantastic capabilities, but it stands a user in good stead to either by trial and error experiment a bit, or take some courses that are available for free on Google, on Udemy, on Coursera, and so forth, just to familiarize yourself with how to use the tools out there for maximum productivity for your user experience. So let's get back to some of those. So some of those I have mentioned, but one that stands out for me is IBM's Watson, or Dr. Watson, whatever. It is a tool that's been used for quite a while now, as opposed to your chatbots, your conversational AI. But it's become like a major go-to in the medical fraternity. Even professionals use it, and it's improved experiences tremendously. If you think at the advancements that AI has done in operating theaters, for example, if you go to that application in the medical physical application world, it is astounding how medical professionals are aided in a blink of an eye to get information and that aids them in their decision making, for example. And so those are two major examples of how AI has significantly improved the user experience. It might be the professional experience, but coming back to chatbots for us everyday users, the same thing applies. It will become extremely complex and powerful. Not to use the word powerful in a negative sense, but intelligent for the everyday user to experience, the true value of AI.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you raised quite a number of significant points just to reflect on. I love the fact that you are saying, we all need to equip ourselves with the skills needed to be able to work with these tools. In the absence of that, these tools will not be useful to us. And, people are so stuck on the idea that AI is coming to take away the jobs. But people are actually saying it's not the AI that will take away the jobs from you. It's people that have the ability to use these AI tools that will actually come and replace you. And I'm just so glad that you brought that to the conversation. And, I am also a big advocate and proponent of people upskilling and reskilling themselves, even with free courses online. There's a lot of free courses online. There are a lot of cheap courses that people can enroll in and sharpen their skills in terms of being able to interact with these tools. I also love just the role that the cognitive linguistic concept plays into these things, because I know most of the people, their biggest frustration is that when they're chatting with the bots, it's the whole thing of it's not human enough, or it doesn't get me. So thank you for just taking us behind the scenes and just explaining that concept, and just that understanding that a lot of work is going into making these things more understandable, so that that interaction between a human being and the machines is quite seamless. I really, really appreciate that from the conversation.
Yeah, Sarah, I just want to again come back to that human centricity, right? I
Yes.
think that is again the major thing, that users see themselves as I'm the center of this use. Okay, and although the AI has got these capabilities of learning from my use, I too have to learn something from it. And I mean, that reciprocation is a very good thing, is that you become aware, maybe in the back of your mind or subtly, of how AI is working, because that's your experience. And like you will experience something like, let's say you meet a new person in your career, in your workplace, or in a friendship and so forth. The same thing applies. I mean, you're going to have these dialogues. You're going to interpret something very incorrectly, and the person will maybe be mad at you for a week or whatever. And then you join up again and say, listen, I'm very sorry. I think I misunderstood you. And the relationship picks up from there and says, yes, you did. I was very upset, but okay, this is actually what I meant. You see, so I'm not saying that I will go to that social understanding, because that's truly the emotional side that we humans have. But the principle is that there's collaboration needed. You can't just expect this tool to be that intelligent. It's not that intelligent.
Yeah.
So it learns. It learns, but the human, that learning is surrounds the human, and the human is the one that has to instruct it and teach it. And that's the exciting part about it, is that when you start using the tools like ChatGPT and so forth, and you're aware of what you input and what you expect, you can start modifying it. Say, no, you didn't get my meaning, but let's try the following, and I'll give you a new prompt, or I'll give you new information. And I don't know how many listeners have done this, but you come back and say, oh, thank you for that new input. That's very valuable. That's how the conversation becomes a bit more personal, like human life. Where it'll say, oh, I like your suggestion. And I say, okay, but I'm not interested in what you like, just give me the right answer. But it has that capability because it's been exposed to that feature of human speech, that we have a courtesy amongst one another to say, Sarah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for that tip or something. And it picks up on that, and it joins that type of conversation, that form of the language use. Okay, so now you can see how the language use is so important for the user experience, and that's what you referred to. No, but this thing it's not giving me anything back. But it has the capabilities, but you have to start interacting with it so that it picks up on these small things in human interaction and how we express ourselves to also express something back that suits you. And it's a learning curve. Yeah, it's not a one fit. It's definitely a learning curve.
Beautiful, beautiful, and just very well explained again. And I love just that reciprocalness that you have brought to the conversation. I noticed that ChatGPT is always doing that. When it gives you, an answer to ask you, to like or to, did you find the answer helpful? And I imagine it's
Exactly.
continuously
Yes.
learning from that kind of feedback that you are giving it as a human being based on the experience that you've just had with it.
Yep.
Great conversation. Let's dive into ethical considerations. When we bring these conversations to the fore, the biggest thing that is on people's minds is just the issue of ethics. As we delve into making AI more human centered, what ethical considerations should we keep in mind, especially when it comes to understanding and responding to human language?
Okay, so if the as a user, many of us will have already experienced to some extent the ethical considerations of AI use. If you type in something inappropriate, the AI will immediately tell you, I am not privy to that information, or I refuse to answer it because it's inappropriate, or whatever. It's got some return that within that ethical domain, it has already picked up, made connections of what you intend is not ethical. And it will respond saying that I can't help you with it, I can't venture into that domain. So that is an immediate example of how we experience that ethical thing. But ethical language use implies, at the surface level, considerations like what we're aware of. If you make a comment based on, comment on race or gender or something like that, then in normal conversation, that within certain communities, you're in for a heated debate or reprimand or whatever, because you is gone, in my opinion, is gone beyond the people getting upset and wanting to be addressed differently and so on. But that becomes a real issue. And so there's also that type of language used and how it is being addressed is now a real ethical issue that has to be considered in AI. So artificial intelligence has to now be intelligent about exactly the same things that we as humans consider unethical in the use of the language, right? Obviously, subcultures accept a certain form and function of language, others don't. And those are the discrepancies or the disparities that, as humans we have to attend to, but also AI. So when we develop AI, obviously you refer to that, we have to have a development and deployment component that takes cognizance of it, that respects it, and of course design systems that adhere to these this only makes governance of the ethical framework very difficult. And earlier I referred to UNESCO, that as a sort of a governing body has put together the major role players to come to some sort of agreement, at least to say that yes, we agree in principle to ethical use, and whatever we build into it, will be will be focused and will position itself to adhering to the principle of ethicalness, if I can put it that way. So it's a starting. I mean, there's a lot that complexity, of course, that still needs to be sorted out. I think national borders also will have their own, their own implementation of it, because one country cannot decide for another. But there will be this overwatch from a global standpoint that would be would have to be adhered to. If you think about the POPI Act, for example, right? In Europe, it's the GDPR, I think it is. In South Africa, it's the Personal Protection or Personal Information Act. And for South Africa, it's got its own flavor and application and so forth, content. And so it's a bit different for European countries. But if you read those documents, they have basically agreed to the same thing. And I think that is exactly where it will stand with the ethical application, deployment and application in AI, in ethical considerations.
Listen, sitting here and just listening to you, bring a lot of value and a lot of context. It also sounds quite overwhelming, especially when it comes to the cultural context and language, like you highlighted earlier on, in the conversation. Certain phrases that, certain people group consider to be normal will be very offensive in another people group. How do you start just giving that? How do you start drawing the balance, especially when you're designing these models? Because once these models are designed, they are designed to serve a wide range of people from different people group. And really, if I don't have context of a certain cultural group of people and I'm designing this model, there's no way I'm going to put that into consideration. In fact, I'm going to put things into consideration from my perspective, which will be most likely offensive to another people group, a cultural context, because I don't understand. In my world, this is acceptable, this is okay, but in that other world, it is unacceptable. So the question is, how do you start making sure there is a balance when these things are being designed?
Well, again, the word balance is probably analytic, but the fact of the matter is that like we as humans sometimes fail, and I mean our workplaces become so diverse. Like if you go to New Zealand or you go to Japan, most of those from most countries, 20 countries, and they all have normal understanding of English because you've got a native English speaker, but then you've got a person that comes from India or from Singapore or whatever, and English is definitely not their first language. It's probably, in some cases, the third language of preference, right? And as I've referred to the problem between Arabic and German, for example, that problem is real in the language use. And so in the focus of the cultural aspect is most definitely, if you're not aware of that, you will get it wrong and you will offend people. And that makes it difficult because now, how do I now consider every culture? How's that going to work? So I've got to go and learn this culture, that culture. But I think that in general, people are very leaning towards one another. We have empathy, which a computer doesn't have. And that's one of the major differences. I think I alluded to that very early on in the discussion. We have empathy. We know how fragile we are as individuals, and we take that to the table when we start a dialogue and so forth. And our focus then will be as, okay, but how can I help you? So I made a mistake. I'm very sorry and so forth. Okay, let's restart this and so forth. The machine doesn't have that. Okay, presently. So we have to design it. Luckily, what we do have is it does have access to what we call large language models. It's the things that you read in the press that they have access to 3 billion parameters, and I mean the size. Excuse me, the size of the model is 20 petabytes, which is I think a million terabytes. It is massive. Let's just seal the conversation on that. It is massive amounts of data. Our minds really can't process it really. So it's got access to it, and of course there will be huge pockets that it will have access to in a cultural domain, right? And let's say English, which is a major domain, but it will also have an enormous amount of language that's been shared within Basha in Afghanistan, whatever. And this is where your NLP comes in translation, right? So humans will have now instructed AI and say, okay, so this word in English has 3 meanings in Arabic or in Pasha, because it depends on the context. So if this is if you get this information, which is the context, then this is the meaning. So the same word can either mean book or writer, for example. In English, there's no discussion about it. Okay, so I am talking about a book because it's got pages, right? It is inferable in Arabic because of the context. I don't use the language to say that it's a book. I use a context, and from the context, you infer that it's a book. You know, so it is different words. But that's how AI learns from it. Okay. Yeah, so I hope that sort of answers the question.
It does. It does. It does. In addition to what you've said, I'm also just thinking, I think there is need for an aggressive drive for diversity and inclusion, where you have as many people from different cultural backgrounds, participating in this industry. Otherwise, if it's people that just think a certain way, then issues of bias becomes a big challenge.
No, absolutely. I think there is a concerted effort to address bias, right? But you know the complexity of the human brings a problem to this purpose or this learning environment of AI. As I said, humans can invent language, the use of language. I spoke about the surfer language, right? So if you think back many years ago in the Shakespearean era, I think that the vocabulary contained about the extent of 300,000 words. That was the limit. That was it. Today, I mean, the vocabulary in English is completely out of this world. It's vast. But this is the dynamic, as I refer to the dynamics of human capabilities to create, really create, naturally create. We can come up with a word, and once that word sort of gets used enough times, it becomes acceptable and it's incorporated into our vocabulary. Just think about the AI era. How many words? Oh no, let me take a very good example. During the COVID era, during COVID, there were terminology and words that were used that we didn't have in our vocabulary.
True.
And now it's part of it. It's part of our dictionaries. You know, so that is let's say, that is a problem again between human use of language and that of AI or the computer. Okay, is that humans are very dynamic and they can authentically create, whereas the computer can't. So what that signifies is that the work is not done. And you also referred to that. There should be people should embrace AI, you know. But as I say, it is a tool. And what we're saying now is, again, it reverts back to the centricity of humans. Because it's humans that have the superior capabilities. That is not just my opinion, but and we can get a tool like AI to become very intelligent, okay? But it's still from us as humans. You know, we built it, and you know we should be governing it. You know, it should not govern us. That's it. So the language use aspect as there's a huge opportunity in where it's supposed to go and so forth. But it's very complex because humans are at the same time very simplistic, and my wife will point to men and say that they're very single and simple-minded. But at the
I agree
same
with your
time,
wife. I'm aligned with your wife's thinking. I'm aligned.
I know. I've got no good response to that. Yeah, but at the same time, our brains are so complex, so wonderfully created that it manifests in what we do. Yeah. So there is opportunity, but we should be um, how should I put it? We should be optimistic, but at the same time, let me put it this way: conservatively optimistic, not over optimistic. And in this week, I think it was the CEO of OpenAI that made that comment to say that AI is a wonderful tool, but we shouldn't become too um, what was the word he used? But yeah, optimistic or too. We shouldn't be jumping up for joy, so to speak. Because we have responsibilities either side in the use of it.
No, totally agreed. And I think for me, that is the balanced conversation. Not to just say, AI is this savior and this good thing that has come to save humanity. With that kind of thinking, we also need to be looking at the challenges, the limitations that come with AI, that needs to be discussed, and we need to have that in mind. And like you're saying, I love the way you're saying, almost conservative, optimistic should be the position that we should be taking, because there's also a lot of variables and a lot of unknowns, because we are still navigating these waters, and as we go on, we discover challenges that we would have never thought about. So yeah,
Mm.
so being cautious, I think, is I think is a good attitude, and should be the demeanor that people should take. Yes, we embrace, but at the same time, let's be cautious because of all these issues. So yeah, totally agreed and very aligned with your way of thinking. Um, I'm a teacher by profession, started my career as a teacher. So anything to do with education is something that really beats my heart. Let's dive into just looking at the educational implications, considering the role of AI in education. How can we leverage human centered approaches to address the linguistic cognitive gap for the learners in different ages and backgrounds?
Yeah, so you probably have a lot more knowledge about education than I have. But I think it is obviously a topic that's close to home. Loving people and having tutored at one of the universities so far. And I believe that AI certainly can play an extensive role in education. I don't, at the same time, the use of AI is definitely in South Africa is not near where it, it, it can be and probably should be. And I think we've touched on some of those reasons, being the whole exposure. We have to be um, uh, uh, very cautious, and we have to take a pertinent responsibility and accountability view of how we expose AI, the capabilities of AI, in an educational context. Um, so that is definitely something that needs to be looked at. And I think maybe, I don't know, I don't follow, um, consistently how it is in education in South Africa at the moment. But I can illustrate by way of somewhere else in the world. There is a focus group which is called Computer Assisted Collaborative Learning, which directs its attention to enabling this interaction between computers and humans in a supportive role, and to support the intersubjective meaning making. And this is one of the topics that we alluded to in culture and knowledge and so age in education. So it's very intersubjective. And, and how understanding of the individual and the collective is serviced by the technology, right? And so it's a partial and a whole problem. So if we look at that collaboration, um, certain fields like algebra, geometry, and so forth, which is very specific and precise, the AI capabilities are fantastic, right? Because that fits in very well with how the machine operates. Um, it understands the mathematical algorithms and all that, and it functions very well on that score. Um, uh, I did see in the week on I think it was Google Media or YouTube somewhere that there's an application that was brought out that can interpret the geometry. So I didn't go into it, but I'm aware that there's continuously new applications in the education market coming, being marketed and being exposed. But I don't have inside information on it. But the proposition is that interpretations result from dynamically constructed involving context, which aids the human's cognitive analytical process. So, what is called this computer supported collaborative learning is that the system mimics how we learn, right? And that's the assistant side of it. So it'll start showing the capabilities of how people of different ages learn, and that's in itself, as you know, is a vast um, area of expertise that has to go into that, and that has to be shared and communicated and developed. Because in every age of the brain functioning and development, the language use has to be balanced in that regard. So these systems, or the research and the application of those systems are focused around that. So at each age level, they take cognizance of how the brain functions at that age and how the language is used at that age, and that's put into these models, the learning models, and that will come out in certain applications, helping assisting students. As I've referred to aphasia, for example, but that's not a medical context, in a rehabilitation context, how the AI is used there. Okay. But of course, it makes sense in the normal education, in a curriculum setup or context that AI can be instructed and it can be deployed to aid in that regard. You can just take one example as for recommender systems. Now, if I have an essay, as I referred to, an essay to write, then AI can definitely help me if I give it the parameters of the essay correctly. I'm sure you've seen or the AI that you want an explanation at, let's say, at secondary level, school level, or explain this to me as a 5-year-old. Must tell you that AI sometimes gets it wrong. I mean, some 5-year-olds will not understand what it puts forward. But what I'm saying is that's the assistance that goes into the educational side. I think that education as a whole, I say I don't know where South African schools are at this level. I don't know whether the tertiary institutions pretty much care whether you bring AI into the classroom. I don't know. But there are tools, as I said to you, Fetch Scholar or something, Fetch Study. That's one instance of an application that can very um, um, eloquently be employed or deployed within an educational setup. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
No, you do. And, from your explanation, I actually then just realized why this linguistic cognitive gap addressing that is actually very important, because now when you even reduce it to, you know, an AI being able to express itself in a language that is age appropriate, then it becomes very critical, depending on the audience. So yes, no, you've brought so much clarity. Thank you so much. In fact, now it actually brings, the linguistic cognitive concept value home, when you start looking at it, especially in the education sector, because you don't want a model that is giving, it is expressing itself at a secondary or high school level, when the intended target audience are preschoolers, for example. So yes, no, thank you so much. Yeah,
So
thank you.
I think just to conclude this, that obviously points towards the three the three types of applications of AI. The one I said was in the public domain, and pretty much use at this point in time is in the public domain. So in education, you get education companies who develop software, AI software for education. They are probably going to the second mode where they use APIs to target the specific language used within a domain, right? Which will then be age appropriate and culture appropriate, because they can govern that, right? To a certain extent. That is the middle ground. It also still makes use of the public domain, right? I would say to fill up the gaps where the application, the proprietary domain is too small, right? So say if your application is in South Africa in a very specific, in Sesotho, whatever, but the information, there's too little information in the cultural domain, then it will, in that tier of AI, it will still rely on or have access to the public domain to enhance or to fill in the gaps. And then there's the third domain, which is the serious stuff, where the domain, the development is completely proprietary. That's just to put in perspective the types of use of AI. And where education in South Africa sits, I'm not too sure, but it most probably is still in tier one of that use.
Well, Dr. Heinz, you've brought a lot of value. You've explained the technical jargons into everyday language that people can understand. As we start concluding this conversation, let's look at the future trends and development. Looking ahead, what are some exciting trends or development in the field of human-centered AI that you believe will have a significant impact on our daily lives?
Yes, I think I've referred to the components of AI and machine learning specifically, because we talk about learning in education, but also in a general sense that we have to learn with the AI component as it will learn from us, being human-centered, right? So there are these components that bring a bit more understanding to how complex this is, and I've referred to it during the talk, deep learning. So more and more complexity is added to humans' observations and the collaboration from the interactions with AI. Such that new neural networks, so that's the new ways that the brain functions, and how AI is now mimicking that or learning how it functions, and it becomes capable of using or coming up with these algorithms, which is basically mathematical, right? Everything within the computer is mathematical, mathematically expressed, so that's the language used. But then it has the neuro-linguistic programming side that returns a natural interpretation of that mathematical mumbo jumbo that's doing in the black box area. Okay. So in the neural aspect, the future holds. It's already, but I mean, the advancements are in that neural network space. Things like CNN, which is convolutional neural networks, or RNN, and so forth. There's a huge expansion now as the understanding of how the brain functions is being observed, and more and more knowledge has come to light in research and so forth. And I mean, that's the purpose of research, right? As you all know, having done an MBA and so forth, there's a component that applies the research, and there's a component in academics that has to regurgitate, to use the word, is to reciprocate the learnings from observations and practice, and then again coming up with theories and that, and it's tested by practice. So there should be that reciprocation in a broad sense, you know, between research and practice, and that goes into the AI domain, you know, and that's how it evolves. So future trends in the deep learning goes that way, where human function is paramount to the evolution of the neural capabilities. So human's physical brain function is important, but more so the mind. And this is where things become a bit more tricky, because there's a big difference between the biological function of the brain and the mind. Because here we are talking about consciousness and emotion, feelings, and empathy, those things, which are quite different. Okay, so the future trends are moving into that. I don't know if you've heard about the objective, or there's a goal that's being talked about now, which is called general intelligence, or AGI,
Yes.
and it's quite different from generative intelligence. Okay, so the next advances, I think, will be in NLP, the natural language processing space, and the understanding of natural languages, which we have discussed in great detail now. It grows because humans are at the center of dialogue and interpretation, right? And for the AI to understand all the nuances and the possibilities of how we entertain this in dialogue. For example, again, comes back to the human ability to look at another human and understand the non-linguistic signs, like a frown, for example, to then interpret back. Okay, there was no name shade in that sense, but the sign, I interpret the sign and say, oh goodness, this person doesn't understand me. Okay, let me put it to you another way. Okay, so those are the things that will become trendy for AI, is to understand. You know, for Siri, for example, to now have the capability to read your expressions, your facial expressions, and be able to interpret that and give a response like you would do, you know. And there will be a lot to learn, and we will observe things going completely wrong there, because I mean, but it will learn from the human-centric input, from those facial expressions, because you know as well as I do that humans have a dark side that you can manifest, express a sign, but you have different intentions. Your intentions aren't ethical. It's not clear. You actually want to guide the person into a corner to say, now I've got you. You know, yes, you're wrong. That type of thing. Okay. And it's real stuff. It will come to the fore in the way that that AI is developed, and so of course it perhaps brings us back to the ethical side. But I'm just illustrating the way that humans function, how we interact with one another, there's still a major gap with the way that IT functions and how it responds. It's very much still whatever you input, it will give you an output, and as good as the input is, that's as good as the output is. It certainly still does not have the capabilities that we as humans have. Okay, but I see a trend. There's a huge trend in the NLP space. Conversational interfaces will escalate. The prowess, how chatbots will be able to respond to you. That's going to escalate. In providing services, in health, like many of your health companies now, you go into the websites, they've got that. There are companies that excel. I think the area that most excels at the moment with conversational AI is social media platforms in marketing. How they find out what you like, that's specifically where I'm fed up with Netflix, for example, the AI component, because it is decided what I like, because I've over time I've with a specific intent I've watched a certain genre, right, and now I can't find anything else. But there's no interface that I can tell Netflix, hey, stop it, I've had enough of this. I want something different, I will now want some romantic stuff. My wife will say, hallelujah. So just to change the genre will make her happy. But it doesn't have an interface. But I see that going there. If enough users tell Netflix, hey, come on, man, it's not good enough. You're deciding for me. I want to tell you what I want. And then they will say, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so let's learn. So it might come to this. Just think about this. That it'll pick up that certain people, certain times of the month, are a bit groggy, unforgiving. Okay. It might pick up that, and it will recommend certain programs that will be empathetic to your situation, that you find yourself in. I am now referring to both men and women, but that will come with AI, because that's what we as humans do. Okay. And so, in conclusion, needed to my research and practice in the use of context, where AI is still very narrowly applied and very deterministic, I say. I want to conclude by quoting researchers who stated this following. They said that any human response to a situation or artifact is based upon a multitude of interacting factors. A human will see and then interpret the situation, knowing the history of the interaction, using their own cultural background, drawing upon their own experiences, and with a specific perception of other people and artifacts in that environment. AI is not there yet.
Absolutely beautiful and very, very insightful. Thank you so much for bringing so much value. Like I said, for just breaking down complex concepts into something that is easily understandable. Really, really appreciate just your great input. Do you have any closing remarks as we finally close this podcast?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I must say it was a joy being on your podcast, and I really hope that your listeners have gained some value out of it. But it's been an absolute joy and a privilege, and thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. And for now, we are going to say ciao, ciao, until the next podcast.
Cheers.
Cheers.